You know what's absolutely wild? Just when everyone thought the Toronto Blue Jays offseason couldn't get any crazier after that gut-wrenching Game 7 loss, we're now talking about Mike Trout potentially coming to Toronto, not as some far-fetched fantasy, but as an actual trade scenario that insiders are discussing seriously enough to put their names behind. Christopher Klein from Fansided dropped this prediction today, and it's got Blue Jays fans doing mental gymnastics trying to figure out if this is genius or madness. A $426 million contract, a three-time MVP, one of the greatest players of this generation, coming to Toronto to replace Bo Bichette if he walks and upgrade from Addison Barger in right field. This is the kind of move that either makes you a champion or haunts you for a decade. Let me start with the obvious reality check. The Blue Jays just came within one game of winning their third championship. They proved they can compete at the highest level. They showed they have the core talent to win it all, but they also exposed some weaknesses. The offense went cold at the worst possible times. The lineup lacked that consistent middle-of-the-order threat, who opposing pitchers genuinely fear. And now they're sitting in this precarious position where Bo Bichette's future is uncertain. Addison Barger hasn't proven he's ready for championship-level production, and the entire AL East is loading up to make another run. The Mike Trout angle makes sense from a pure talent perspective. When he's healthy, T here is nobody in baseball who changes the complexion of a lineup like he does. Last season, he slashed .232, .359, .439 with 26 home runs and 64 RBIs in no 130 games. Now, those batting average numbers aren't eye-popping, but that on-base percentage combined with power is exactly what Toronto needs. Imagine a lineup with Vladimir Guerrero Jr. crushing in the heart of the order and Mike Trout getting on base ahead of him or driving him in from the cleanup spot. That's the kind of 1-2 punch that wins championships. But here's where this whole thing gets complicated, and honestly, where it starts feeling more like speculation than reality. The Blue Jays have been heavily linked to Kyle Tucker all offseason. Tucker is younger, less injury-prone, plays the same position, and comes without the massive long-term financial commitment that Trout carries. If Toronto lands Tucker, then pursuing Trout becomes completely pointless. You can't have two elite right fielders making superstar money. It doesn't make organizational sense, it doesn't make financial sense, and it doesn't make roster construction sense. So this entire Mike Trout scenario only becomes relevant if the Kyle Tucker pursuit falls through completely. And even then, you have to ask yourself if taking on a contract that runs through 2030 for a player with significant injury concerns is really the move that pushes you. Trout has been one of the most consistent performers in baseball for over a decade, but he's also missed significant time in recent years. His body has shown it can't handle a full season anymore. And you are not just committing to 1 or 2 years. You are committing to 6 more years of that contract at massive annual value. The financial implications alone should make any front office pause. Ross Atkins and the Blue Jays ownership would have to be willing to absorb one of the biggest contracts in baseball history at a time when they also need to think about extending Vladimir Guerrero Jr., filling holes in the rotation, upgrading the bullpen, and maintaining roster flexibility to address unexpected needs. Taking on Trout's deal would significantly limit what else they could do both now and in the future. But let's say for a moment that the Tucker thing doesn't happen. Let's say he signs an extension with Houston or gets traded somewhere else entirely. Does that change the calculus on Trout? Maybe. Because at that point, Toronto is staring at a right field vacancy, potential departure of Bo Bichette, and a championship window that might be starting to close. In that scenario, making a bold move for a proven superstar who still has elite ability when healthy starts to make more sense. The Angels being in full rebuild mode is the other piece that makes this even remotely plausible. They need to move on from the Trout era and start fresh. They need prospects. They need to clear payroll, and Trout, he controls his destination. Would he waive it for Toronto? Possibly. The Blue Jays just went to the World Series. They have a passionate fan base. They offer immediate championship contention. For a player who spent his entire career with a losing organization, the chance to finally play meaningful October baseball might be appealing enough to approve a trade to Toronto. What Klein's prediction highlights is the positional flexibility this move would create. Trout slides into right field. Addison Barger could shift to third base if Bo leaves. you are not scrambling to fill multiple holes with question marks. You are adding an established superstar who brings veteran leadership, playoff experience from his limited postseason appearances, and the kind of name recognition that makes your organization a bigger draw for other free agents. T here's value in that beyond just the on-field production, the defensive component is interesting too. While Barter showed flashes, Trout's experience and instincts in crucial situations could be the difference in tight playoff games. Toronto lost leads late in games during their World Series run. Having elite defense at every position becomes critical when every single out matters. Trout isn't the defender he was 5 years ago, but he's still capable, still smart, still aware of game situations in ways that young players just aren't. Yet, from a lineup construction standpoint, John Schneider would have incredible flexibility. You could bat Trout second to get on base for Vladdy. You could slide him into cleanup to drive in runs. His elite plate discipline would mesh perfectly with Toronto's patient offensive approach. His ability to work deep counts and wear down opposing pitchers would be invaluable over a long season, and especially in playoff series where every at-bat matters. But let's talk about what Toronto would have to give up to make this happen. The Angels aren't just going to hand over Mike Trout for salary relief. They're going to want a substantial prospect package, probably headlined by top pitching prospects from AAA Buffalo. They're going to want young, controllable talent that can be part of their next competitive window. And Toronto, coming off a World Series appearance, would have to decide if they're willing to deplete their farm system for a player in his 30s with injury concerns and a massive contract. That's the real tension here. Championship windows don't stay open forever. The Blue Jays are right there, right now. They just proved it by getting to Game 7. But mortgaging the future for present-day success is always a gamble. If Trout stays healthy and produces at an elite level, and if Toronto wins a championship in the next couple of years, nobody will care what prospects they gave up. But if Trout gets hurt, if the production declines faster than expected, if that contract becomes an albatross that prevents them from making other necessational anchor that sets you back for years. The comparison Klein makes to how the Yankees and Dodgers have built their dynasties through bold acquisitions is valid to a point, but those teams also have significantly larger revenue streams and payroll flexibility that Toronto doesn't have. The Blue Jays can't just absorb bad contracts and move on like some of these bigger market teams can. Every dollar committed to Trout is a dollar that can't go somewhere else. Every year of that deal is another year where flexibility gets tighter. Here's what I keep coming back to, though. If Kyle Tucker signs elsewhere, if the offseason plays out in a way where Toronto strikes out on their primary targets, does doing nothing become more dangerous than taking a big swing on Mike Trout after getting so close to a championship, after proving the core can compete at that level? Can you really go into next season with Addison Barter as your everyday right fielder? Can you really let Bo Bichette walk without replacing that production with someone equally impactful? The injury concerns with Trout are legitimate and can't be ignored. He's played more than 140 games, just once in the last 5 seasons. The back problems, the various nagging injuries, the wear and tear of a long career, it's all there in his medical history. But when he's on the field, he's still one of the most productive players in baseball. That on-pace percentage, that power, that ability to change the game with one swing, that doesn't just disappear overnight. What makes this prediction even more fascinating is the timeline element. The Angels need to make decisions about their direction now. Trout's no-trade clause means he has to approve any deal. If he's willing to waive it specifically for Toronto, that tells you everything about how the rest of baseball views the Blue Jays championship window. It validates that this team is viewed as a legitimate car receipt.